Certainly you've heard about this. You will not replace us. They're talking to basically minorities. You and Jews will not replace us. They're talking to Jews. Carlson knows what this is. He's pushed it 400 times. He's continuing to spew it, which brings us to how he does it now. If there's a sliver of good news here for you, I'll offer it. I know what you're thinking, Ari, how can there be any good news here? Well, the sliver is that at a time like this, even Tucker Carlson doesn't want to admit he's pushing this racist replacement theory. Even him. And he's pushed it before. That reminds you that even in his universe, let alone the entire population of this country, which still has many people who would not truck with anything like this is not actually still acceptable, even in 2022, even with the people we've been reporting on the ballots. So he has to do this dodge until either this gets more acceptable, which may be what he wants and others want, or until it gets laundered to a degree that it's just one more politically debated item. So he has to do a dance where he says what I just showed you. He claims he doesn't know what this is, and then he continues to push it and peddle it in other laundered language. Maybe trolling or maybe a way to have it both ways. So he goes on to say this.
The great replacement theory is coming from the left. The Democratic Party has decided that rather than convince you, people who are born here, that their policies are helping you and making the country better and stronger, they will change the electorate.
They will change the electorate. So first he deflects and denies, then he repeats a version of it. Who are they changing the electorate? Well, according to replacement theory, which is this discredited and debunked form of racism that also plays into the authoritarianism we see rising in this nation, the idea that there's only certain people who are allowed to be citizens, certain people who are allowed to vote, certain people who should rightfully have government or police power. Well, they are racial minorities and Jews. That's what Tucker Carlson has been saying while claiming he's not pushing it. And that brings us to one more thing we've prepared for you before we bring in our expert tonight. And this is new and different than some of what I showed you earlier this week. And this is important. Mr. Carlson has a long history here of playing games and worse with these serious facts, including violence and murder. He will downplay incidents of right-wing violence. Then he will ramp up his rhetoric about violent incidents that occur when more white people are the victims in a U.S. incident or attack. Any violence is wrong, of course. For Mr. Carlson, however, there's a blunt theme. He invokes replacement theory to scare white people about a minority Jewish invasion, denies he's doing so, and projects his and this theory's own racial, religious fixation out onto everyone else. Now, that may sound quite obviously hypocritical. There is a method here. It echoes an ugly history in Europe and elsewhere. When you're building these kind of movements, there are people who don't want to self-identify as racists or religious bigots. So they need propagandists and others to present the world through a laundered version of history and current events that offers a prism for people who might not want to admit or even realize they engage in this double standard. So we ran through it, we looked at the work, we put together this archive of Carlson's statements about different types of attacks to show the disturbing double standard.
What he wrote does not add up to a manifesto. It is not a blueprint for a new extremist political movement. A black nationalist BLM supporter drove an SUV through a Christmas parade in Waukesha, Wisconsin. It was a slaughter. Because a mentally ill teenager murdered strangers, you cannot be allowed to express your political views. If indiscriminately murdering women and children at a Christmas parade isn't terrorism, then what exactly is it? There's no obvious ideological lesson to draw from all this, yet that hasn't stopped the usual power-hungry morons from trying to leverage human pain for political advantage. It's still interesting to know a lot more about the man who apparently committed this crime. Frank James posted black supremacist rants on his YouTube channel. The only thing that could make what happened in Charlottesville worse would be if we allowed a small number of people in power to make America less tolerant and less free in its aftermath. Maybe if the entire news media tells you every day of your life that America hates you because of your skin color, why wouldn't we see more crimes like this?
Why wouldn't we see more crimes like this? The framed rhetorical question is a very weak device. It's simplistic, it's unimaginative, But in some cases, although it can be easily dismissed, it's also quite dangerous. We're watching an election where people are on the ballot openly advocating authoritarianism and the end of democracy. And we're watching some of the most influential people in the nation tell everyone, well, maybe there should be, quote, more crimes like this. NYU history professor Ruth Ben-Ghiat is an expert on exactly these.
Back on everything we buy.
The first wake-up call came 2 weeks ago when we heard
many areas will stay less than a quarter inch. Even with the sun-driven rain chances this weekend, things will remain light. And of course, pay attention to the overnight lows this weekend as we are forecasting 30s. You may have to cover some of those outdoor plants. For KELO Land Weather, I'm meteorologist Scott Munt.
Oh, I love this. They say old golfers never die, they just keep putting along. That's true for 97-year-old Jack Lauer of Brandon.
Despite his age, Jack golfs every day, weather permitting. You'll meet him on tonight's Eye on KELO Land, and you're going to see that he is pretty good at golfing. He's even better at finding golf balls.
Don Jorgensen will show us his collection in his basement that's in the thousands. Just putting along is tonight's Eye on KELO Land at 10.
Oh, that golfing's keeping him young.
Yeah, Jay, one last check of the weather.
All right, tomorrow, really warm in eastern Carolina with a south wind, Sioux Falls 86. Much cooler out to the west, 70 in Rapid City. Showers and thunderstorms mainly late in the day.
Thanks for joining us.
Have a great evening.
Tonight, we begin with the state of the American economy, the new worries as the stock market plunges, and the breaking news out of the White House tonight, President Biden's drastic steps to try and end the baby formula crisis. Operation Fly Formula, the plan to use Defense Department planes to bring in formula from overseas, as the president invokes the Defense Production Act, the same measure used to get vaccines into arms quickly. Plus, we talked to a mother who was scammed when desperately trying to find formula. Wall Street's biggest decline in nearly 2 years. As Target and Walmart face their worst sell-offs in decades. The concern tonight from CEOs that a recession is coming. Trump's mixed results. Tonight, what we learned about the power of the former president's support after voters went to the polls in 5 states. Tonight's other top headlines. The CDC's summer travel warning about testing. The latest from Ukraine as the U.S. Embassy opens in Kyiv, even as war rages on. Plus, Eye on America, why these women are taking a leap of faith to raise awareness about mental health issues facing female veterans. And One Nation, One Team, One Pay, the game changer, as a deal is reached to make sure the women's national soccer team is finally paid the same as the men.
This is the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell, reporting tonight from New York.
Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us on this Wednesday night. We want to begin tonight with some breaking news. The president just announcing new actions to try and ease the pain of the baby formula shortage. There are 2 major measures. First, to help with supply chain issues, President Biden is invoking the Defense Production Act to get ingredients to manufacturers. That means suppliers will be required to give resources to infant formula plants before other customers. And in hopes of speeding up the import of formula from other countries, President Biden is now directing his administration to use government planes to go overseas and bring formula home. Meanwhile, House lawmakers are voting on a bill tonight that would make it easier for low-income families to get formula. Americans who take part in a nutrition program called WIC usually have to get a specific brand of formula. Well, this bill would allow them to get a different brand that is actually in stock. So we have a lot of news to get to tonight. We're going to start with CBS's Jamie Yukas. Good evening, Jamie.
Good evening, Nora. The president's late-day announcement is the administration's latest move to try and ease the baby formula shortage. More than half of states say they have 40% of formula now out of stock. It's a full-court press to ease the stress of frustrated parents.
This Indiana baby formula facility is operating 24/7, trying to boost its output 30%. But for many desperate families, the relief will not come fast enough. The Federal Nutritional Service that helps low-income women, infants, and children, known as WIC, says more than half of the formula in the U.S. is bought by WIC families, feeding 1.4 million babies.
Parents are in an incredibly desperate situation. When you don't know how to feed your child, that creates a lot of shame, a lot of guilt. Families don't necessarily have the time or resources to go around to 5 or 6 different stores.
The largest maker, Abbott, controls about 40% of infant formula here in the U.S. The FDA reached an agreement to reopen its largest plant in Michigan, but that still leaves a gap on store shelves for at least the next 2 months.
Is this something that we should have been paying attention to?
I think this whole situation really pulled back the curtain on the infant formula manufacturing sector. We have 4 companies that control 90% of domestic infant formula supply.
And now bad actors are starting to prey on parents, like Kimberly Williams, who turned to a Facebook group for help.
I just thought that this was a group of moms that were helping moms.
The new mom to 3-month-old baby Harper spent $168 on 5 cans of formula she never received.
You felt that desperate that you still were like, I'm going to try to do this.
Until somebody's in your position trying to find baby formula and they can't, I don't think that they will truly understand it until they actually have to deal with it.
WIC is advising parents to first look at retail stores, but they can also try food banks, charities, or even their pediatrician. The store behind me has had such a rush, they are now limiting sales to 1 can per parent. Nora?
Wow, well, hopefully this new plan will help. Cmgus with all those details. Thank you so much. And we turn now to the economy and the panic on Wall Street as the country's largest retailers warn of rising inflation costs and fears of a recession grow. All 3 major indexes posted big losses, with the Dow falling more than 1,100 points, or more than 3.5%. Both the NASDAQ and S&P 500 were off more than 4%, with the S&P having its worst day since June of 2020. CBS's Ed O'Keefe has more from the White House.
It was the biggest one-day point drop in 2 years on Wall Street as the nation's top retailers warn price spikes are affecting their bottom line. Target announced a 52% drop in profits last quarter, blaming the growing costs of gas and transportation. Its stock lost 1/4 of its value. Other retailers took double-digit hits following Walmart's stock performance yesterday, the worst in more than 30 years. The global economic slowdown caused by COVID-related factory closures in China and the war in Ukraine has led to record gas prices and a worldwide food shortage, since Ukraine's grain can't be shipped out.
Everyone's struggling with the gas prices. The prices of food have gone up.
Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says it's the cost of trying to stop Vladimir Putin.
There would be spillover effects, and that we are prepared to pay.
President Biden had hoped that the Federal Reserve could raise interest rates to ease inflation. But Chairman Jerome Powell now warns that might not do it.
Whether we can execute a soft landing or not, it may actually depend on factors that we don't control.
It all presents yet another big challenge for the president and his party, hoping to retain control in the fall's midterm elections. The White House today tried to brush off the stock market plunge.
That's not something that we keep an eye on every day.
Now, one day of bad stock prices is one thing, but polling consistently shows most Americans disapprove of how the president's handling inflation. One way he now plans to tackle it is by announcing new economic partnerships with Asian countries designed to streamline supply chain concerns when he travels to South Korea and Japan, starting later this week. Nora?
Ed O'Keefe from the White House, thank you. We want to turn now to the election and a primary that turned out to be a mixed bag for candidates backed by former President Trump. It is still too close to call in Pennsylvania, one of the most closely watched Senate races, and it centers on celebrity Dr. Mehmet Oz. CBS's Robert Costa has been following the latest developments and joins us from Philadelphia. Good evening, Rob.
Good evening, Nora. Dr. Oz was hoping the Trump endorsement would be enough to carry him to victory in Pennsylvania, and it still might be. But David McCormick was able to make inroads with traditional Republicans, citing his business experience and his military service. Here's what's interesting. Both Dr. Oz and McCormick both embrace the Trump agenda, but it's evident that voters are not necessarily taking all of their cues on candidates from former President Trump.
And Robert, how did other Trump-backed candidates do last night?
State Senator Doug Mastriano won Pennsylvania's Republican primary race for governor. He attended that Stop the Steal rally in Washington on January 6, 2021, and has worked to overturn President Biden's victory. But in North Carolina, Madison Cawthorn, the first-term Republican congressman, he was defeated in his primary, even though he had the Trump endorsement, but he has been mired in scandals for months. Nora.
Robert Costa, thank you so much. All right, in Buffalo, residents are still reeling from Saturday's mass shooting that targeted the predominantly black East Side neighborhood. Community members are not only dealing with the racially motivated hate crime, they are also without the only grocery store for miles as the supermarket remains closed during the investigation. CBS's Jerika Duncan is there for us again tonight.
Thank you. Buffalo Bills quarterback Josh Allen's shirt said it all. Choose love. Today, Allen and his teammates traveled to the site of the massacre, bringing a bit of joy to those in pain.
It's a motto that I think maybe that we should start adopting as a country.
They joined city officials, community organizations, and volunteers to donate food, diapers, and other necessities, providing emergency relief while Top Supermarket remains an active crime scene. For many, it is the only market for miles. Now free bus rides are being provided to take residents to another grocery store. 67-year-old Lodina Clyburn grew up in the neighborhood.
This wasn't just a supermarket. This is the Sunday place when you don't want to cook dinner. We come here, we socialize, we run into each other.
The majority of people who live in this section of Buffalo are black. It's why the accused gunman targeted this community and why Jeremy Hoyle and his family felt the need to pay their respects.
Just want to be supportive, and like I say, I just want to be an ally. I think we all have to do that.
Not far from that memorial site, we spotted Sandra Fleming leaving a counseling session. Fleming was friends with Celestine Cheney, one of the 10 victims killed.
What do you say to people who say they're fine and they feel like they can handle this on their own?
Don't fake the funk. Go and get help, counseling. Don't sit in the house as I did. Go out and get it. I think you'll feel better.
Today, New York's Attorney General announced she is launching investigations into social media companies in connection to the attack. Those companies include Twitch, 4chan, 8chan, and Discord, where the accused gunman posted plans about this mass shooting about 30 minutes before he entered this area. Tomorrow morning, Nora, he's expected in court.
A crackdown on social media. Jerika Duncan, thank you. Well, tonight, with news of a COVID spike, there's new guidance from the CDC ahead of Memorial Day's.
Would now make it mandatory for state police to flag someone believed to be a threat, like the suspect, and prevent them from possessing weapons. David.
All right, Stephanie Ramos in Buffalo again tonight for us. Thank you, Stephanie. Now to the economy tonight and another steep plunge on Wall Street, the worst one-day drop now since June of last year. The Dow losing more than 1,100 points, down more than 3.5%. ABC's chief economics correspondent Rebecca Jarvis with us live tonight. Rebecca, of course, what drove the plunge today, and I know you also have news tonight on what more than 100 CEOs across the country are now signaling about whether or not there could be a possible recession ahead.
That's right, David. The biggest driver of the American economy is the American consumer. And when we feel pinched by things like surging prices and cut back on spending, it starts showing up in bellwethers like Target, which today reported dismal earnings in the face of rising inflation. That stock down 25% today. The S&P 500 so far this year down 18%. That is what's in most 401ks. And when you zoom out to the last 5 years, the S&P 500 is still up about 65%. And still, that survey you mentioned, David, of the latest Conference Board survey, 133 CEOs, 68% believe a recession is looming. David?
Rebecca Jarvis back with us tonight. Rebecca, thank you. Next year, ABC News and our local stations across the country preparing for the midterm elections, shaping up one of the most closely watched primary battles here in the U.S. tonight. Still too close to call. Nearly 24 hours later, Dr. Mehmet Oz against David McCormick. So tonight, who's slightly ahead at this hour? ABC's Rachel Scott back in Pennsylvania tonight.
In Pennsylvania tonight, election workers counting the mail-in ballots that could decide their squeaker of a Republican Senate primary. Fewer than 2,000 votes, now separating TV doctor Mehmet Oz, who has a slight lead, and former hedge fund executive David McCormick.
When all the votes are tallied, I am confident we will win.
On election night, Oz paying special tribute to former President Donald Trump, whose endorsement lit a fire under his campaign.
God bless you, sir, for putting so much effort into this race. I will make you proud.
But today, Trump urged Oz not to wait for all the votes to be counted. Dr. Oz should declare victory, the former president said. It makes it much harder for them to cheat with the ballots that they just happened to find. There is no evidence whatsoever of cheating in the Republican primary, and neither of the leading candidates has challenged its legitimacy.
Now we have tens of thousands of mail-in ballots that have not been counted, that are going to need to be counted, but we can see the path ahead. We can see victory ahead.
The winner will go head-to-head with Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman, who scored a decisive win in the Democratic Senate primary after suffering a stroke just days earlier. He filled out his absentee ballot from his hospital room, his wife Giselle filling in for him at his party.
You may have noticed I am not John Fetterman, the next senator of our great state.
Fetterman implanted with a pacemaker just hours earlier. His wife calling it all a, quote, hiccup on the road.
And John is going to be back on his feet in no time.
Pennsylvania still needs to count tens of thousands of mail-in ballots. But once that count is over, if the candidates are separated by less than ½ a point, it will trigger an automatic recount. And that will likely take weeks, David.
We've seen this before. Rachel Scott in Pennsylvania. Rachel, our thanks to you. Overseas tonight into the war in Ukraine, Finland and Sweden now officially applying to join NATO. President Biden is now set to meet with leaders of both countries tomorrow. And of course, this all comes after Vladimir Putin threatened retaliation if these countries move forward with their plans. Ian Pennell in Ukraine again tonight.
Tonight, as the war in Ukraine rages, President Biden welcoming Finland and Sweden as they made their bids to join NATO official today. Biden will meet with the leaders of both countries tomorrow at the White House. On the ground, Russia claiming almost 1,000 fighters have surrendered at the Azovstal steel plant in Mariupol. The fate of the fighters remains uncertain, with Moscow signaling it may try them as war criminals. And in Kyiv, the first war crimes trial of a captured Russian soldier resumed, the defendant pleading guilty to shooting a 62-year-old civilian, the man's grieving widow in court. The soldier now facing life in prison. It's just the first of many alleged war crimes cases in Ukraine.
I mean, I'm sure you can hear that. We've come out to one of the liberated villages, but the road is testament to the battles that are being fought here. This is a Russian tank. It's been totally destroyed. It's now rusting. But down there is pretty much where the front lines are. We're not going to go much closer down there, but you can hear the sound of the battles being fought all around here.
Ruskilazova was liberated from Russian occupation just 3 weeks ago. But that doesn't mean it's safe for the residents to return home. Now, less than 200 remain in a village where 5,000 used to live. Although Putin's troops have withdrawn back towards their own border, they still indiscriminately shell the town.
I was going to ask you how the battle's going. I can hear how it's going.
Deputy Commander Roman says active combat is still going on. He expects the Russians to counter at any time, but says his forces are trying to teach them a lesson they'll never forget. In a nearby village, another Russian attack. Our escorts get nervous.
Sending up too many signals.
They think the Russians could track everyone's phones and target the area. They advise us to leave the village. But these are the dangers too many Ukrainians must now live with every day.
David, in a further sign that the Russians are having problems here, the Pentagon saying that Moscow's main offensive in the Donbass, that's in the east of the country, is shrinking in size and scale, and that after all this time, the Russians are still making little progress. David?
Ian Pennell in Kharkiv for us tonight. Ian, thank you. And back here at home now, into the severe weather threat tonight, the red flag warnings as well from California to Texas. The soaring heat in the south fueling this wildfire in central Texas near Abilene. That system now spreading east. More than 100 million Americans will see temperatures above 90 degrees tomorrow, and then this all moves into the northeast by the weekend. Senior meteorologist Rob Marciano tracking it all for us tonight. Hey, Rob.
Hi, David. This sort of heat and dry air is certainly a product of our warming climate. A lot of red on the map tonight. Check out the red flag warnings that you mentioned from Colorado all the way to Kansas and back through California and Severe thunderstorm watches up for Colorado, Wisconsin, and Kentucky, and those watches will remain up in those same spots tomorrow, stretching all the way to South Carolina for damaging winds, scattered hail, maybe a tornado or two. And here's that record heat. San Antonio hitting 100 degrees for the 4th time already this season. The 90s spreading from Texas across the south, and as mentioned, we'll eventually get up here into the Northeast for a hot weekend. David? Yeah, extreme heat and early this year. Rob, thank you. When we come back here, that milestone victory off the field for U.S. women's national soccer team, a first for equal pay. And then the flight over this country and the attendant suddenly helping a passenger give birth. And now tonight, the baby's name.
For adults with generalized myasthenia gravis, who are positive for acetylcholine receptor antibodies, it may feel like the world is moving without you. But the picture is changing with Vyvgart. In a clinical trial, participants achieved improved daily abilities with Vyvgart added to their current treatment. And Vyvgart helped clinical trial participants achieve reduced muscle weakness. Vyvgart may increase the risk of infection. In a clinical study, the most common infections were urinary tract and respiratory tract infections. Tell your doctor if you have a history of infections or if you have symptoms of an infection. Vyvgart can cause allergic reactions. The most common side effects include respiratory tract infection, headache, and urinary tract infection. Picture your life in motion with Vyvgart, a treatment designed using a fragment of an antibody. Ask your neurologist if Vyvgart could be right for you.
Our Confident Forever plan is possible with a CFP professional.
A CFP professional can help you build a complete financial plan. Visit letsmakeaplan.org to find your CFP professional.
Add Downy to your wash for all the freshness and softness of home, even when you're not at home. Feel the difference with Downy.
Tonight here, a landmark victory for equal pay. Beginning June 1st, the U.S. soccer's men's and women's teams will receive the same pay and the same share of prize money, including the World Cup. This comes after several of the women players settled their discrimination lawsuit against U.S. soccer earlier this year. When we come back here tonight, the remarkable scene playing out on a flight over this country, the flight attendant who was suddenly called into action.
Hi, I'm Steve, and I live in Austin, Texas. I work as a personal assistant to the owner of a large manufacturing firm. I've got anywhere from 10 to 50 projects going at any given time. I absolutely have to be sharp. Let me tell you, I was struggling with my memory. It was going downhill. My friend recommended that I try Prevagen, and over time, it made a very significant difference in my memory and in my cognitive ability. I started to feel a much better sense of well-being.
Prevagen, healthier brain, better life.
Better skin from your body wash? Try Olay Body Wash with skincare super ingredient collagen. Olay Body Wash hydrates for healthier looking skin in just 14 days. From dry and dull to firm and radiant. With Olay Body, I feel fearless in my skin.
You know Liberty Mutual customizes your car insurance, so you only pay for what you need? Like how I customized this scarf. Check out this backpack I made for Marco. Only pay for what you need.
Liberty, 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 liberty. I'm on a mission to talk to people about getting screened for colon cancer and hear their reasons why.
I screened for my son. I'm his biggest fan.
If you're 45 or older at average risk, you have screening options, like Cologuard.
Cologuard is non-invasive and finds 92% of colon cancers. It's not for those at high risk. False positive and negative results may occur. Ask your provider if Cologuard is right for you.
Everyone has a reason to screen for colon cancer. If you're 45 or older, get started at missiontoscreen.com.
Every business, big or small, coast to coast, needs internet that can keep up with its demands. Verizon has fast, reliable internet solutions nationwide, so you can power your business to do more. Find the perfect solution for your business.
With my hectic life, you'd think retirement would be the last thing on my mind. Thankfully, Voya provides comprehensive solutions and shows me how to get the most out of my workplace benefits. Voya helps me feel like I got it all under control.
Voya. Well-planned, well-invested, well-protected.
It's very difficult for the family because you too go through everything that they go through. Maybe not in the same way, but you're still there.
You can quit. Call 1-800-QUIT now for help getting free medication.
Fur, you won't faze me. Unlike Zyrtec, Allegra won't make me drowsy.
Allegra starts working 2 times faster than Claritin. So trees, you won't take me down. When allergies attack, take Allegra.
Before your symptoms take over you.
Live your greatness.
Tonight, the flight attendant suddenly delivering a baby on a Frontier Airlines flight from Denver to Orlando, landing with one more passenger than when they started. Flight attendant Diana Giraldo helping the mother deliver her baby. The captain calling the attendant's actions heroic. All we know tonight is the newborn's new middle name, Sky. When we come back here, the 7-year-old and the race, the shoe that fell off, and you have to see this. Even her family could not believe it.
If you have type 2 diabetes or high blood pressure, you're a target for chronic kidney disease. You can already have it and not know it. If you have chronic kidney disease,
the Wisconsin woman started the Sewing Machine Project, which has now given out more than 3,600 new and used machines, helping survivors of disasters like Hurricane Katrina and refugees from Afghanistan and Somalia. Among recipients, a common thread. All are in need.
It made me be able to sew again.
It helps you economically and physically and mentally. You got it down.
I got it down.
A tool that can provide income.
I made this on a machine that was donated.
For those starting over.
Why do you do it? The fact that I can share them with people to whom they make such a difference is life-changing for them and life-changing for me.
A lover of the craft, helping others on the mend.
Oh, that's pretty.
Janet Shamlian, CBS News, Houston.
Just beautiful. We'll be right back.
We are people who took Ozempic.
Many who end up in the emergency.
Where I compared home insurance rates.
We don't need to print the internet. Some are.
The Department of Homeland Security would be deciding as a government entity what is true and what is false, and working to decide and put out information on a variety of issues, which would of course cause them to engage in censorship and pressure private companies or private media companies to change the information they were publishing.
Speaking of DHS, you have the Homeland Security Secretary heading to the border just 5 days, Harold, before you have this decision. Excuse me, on Title 42. Take a listen.
The cartels are taking advantage. I mean, they know the Border Patrol's overwhelmed. They're processing quick and releasing quick.
It is very important to note that while, of course, we are preparing for the end of Title 42, that does not mean that the border is open beginning on May 23rd. We continue to enforce the laws of this country.
Harold, there's a lot of people that look at this and say the border is open now, in essence, even though that's not what the DHS Secretary says.
You know, I wish that Title 42 would not be suspended. I wish it would not be revoked. You know, COVID is on the uptick all across the country, particularly in the Northeast. You would have to imagine the vaccination rates in a lot of these countries where immigrants or migrants are coming from, they may not have the vaccination rates we do. So Title 42 should be reinstated too. You looked at that tunnel where these drugs and arms are being, weapons are being transported. I mean, this is the like of a major company building out an infrastructure in order to be able to transport its goods. This is a national security issue at our border. I like Secretary Mayorkas and respect him, but he needs more help. There needs to be coordination between the FBI, the CIA, the DEA, the DOJ, and others helping us at the border, not just as a migrant challenge, but as a national security challenge, because that indeed is what it is.
Well, the gremlins have officially hit Britt Hume's camera, so we're going to try to get him back up. But Ari, in an effort to get gas prices to go down, the administration is taking some effort on Venezuela. This is not sitting well with some on Capitol Hill. Democrat Bob Menendez. History shows us negotiations based on unilateral concessions have a failed track record of producing actual changes to the behavior of authoritarian regimes. Giving Maduro a handful of undeserved handouts just so his regime will promise to sit down at a negotiating table is a strategy destined to fail. Those who lament the United States and our allies' dependence on foreign oil because it enriches regimes in terrorist states like Russia should not have a double standard when it comes to enriching a brutal dictatorship like Venezuela. That is from the Democrat from New Jersey, Bob Menendez. Ari.
Well, he's right about the dictatorship of Venezuela, but that's a secondary issue. There's a primary issue. If the Biden administration is recognizing we need oil, and we do, the question is, where should we best get it from? And shouldn't the answer be America? I mean, this subservience they have to the Green New Deal means we cannot produce oil in America, but sure, we can import it from foreigners, even dictatorships. And I've got to tell you, Brett, if this is done in the name of the environment, bunker oil is used in those heavy shipping containers that bring oil to the United States. That is one of the most dirty, pollutant fuel sources that anybody can ever imagine. The more tankers we put on the oceans to bring oil to America, the more we're polluting the air. So I don't know how this supports the Green New Deal in any way. We should develop our energy here at home and not bring it in through imports from foreign countries. We should be energy independent, and we have the ability to do so.
Barbecue ribs buffet.
Humidity, the wind is kicked up 20 miles an hour, but that wind will drop off as the night goes on, and temperatures dropping into the 50s by midnight. Meanwhile, in Aberdeen, a decent amount of sunshine through mainly some mid and high level clouds at 7.
Coming up, KELO News starts now.
Live from KELOLAND Media Group, KELOLAND News at 6.
Situation room.
The First Alert Weather Team, only on Dakota News Now.
Breaking news tonight, the major move by President Biden to tackle the nationwide baby formula shortage. The president invoking the Defense Production Act, usually reserved for times of war, to boost the country's supply. After the shortage left multiple infants hospitalized, the Surgeon General on the push to get formula back on shelves. Also tonight, the Pennsylvania GOP Senate primary, too close to call. Dr. Mehmet Oz, endorsed by President Trump, possibly headed for a recount, while another Trump pick, North Carolina's scandal-plagued Madison Cawthorn, loses his seat. Chilling new details in the Buffalo supermarket shooting, the employee who says she kicked out the suspect the day before, and the 911 dispatcher accused of hanging up as the shooting unfolded. News on COVID, the CDC now saying a third of all Americans live in high-risk areas, urging them to wear masks indoors as daily cases triple in a month. In Ukraine, the Russian soldier pleading guilty in the first war crimes trial since the invasion began. The Dow plunging more than 1,000 points, the worst drop for stocks in nearly 2 years. And the major victory for the U.S. women's soccer team in their years-long battle for equal pay.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Good evening, everyone. With many American families bordering on desperation in their search for baby formula, the White House has just announced a major step to increase formula availability, invoking the Defense Production Act. That will prioritize manufacturing resources and ingredients for formula production. It comes as a network of milk banks reports a 20% increase in demand for donated milk. But tonight, some parents are pursuing their own alternatives, in some cases leading to trips to the hospital. Our Kate Snow is here with late details. First of all, what are you learning about the White House's move tonight?
So this is the Biden administration, as you say, announcing that it will push private industry to ramp up production of baby formula, and they're also launching Operation Fly Formula, using Defense Department aircraft to bring in formula from other countries more quickly.
Invoking the Defense Production Act allows the president to direct private companies to produce more baby formula.
And I've directed my team to do everything possible to ensure there's enough safe baby formula and that it's quickly reaching families that need it the most.
We want to pursue every avenue possible to get formula back on shelves for parents. That is our goal. You know, again, we come at this not just as public servants, but as parents and grandparents.
The baby formula shortage has gotten so severe, it's now leading to hospitalizations. 11-week-old Chloe is doing better today after gastrointestinal surgery on Monday. Born with allergies to dairy and soy, her parents couldn't find a special amino acid-based formula she needed.
Nowhere in stores. We looked everywhere, even places that said they would have it, like a CVS that was 45 minutes from our house. We called them, we went there, you know.
3 weeks ago, mom Savannah Wheatley posted a desperate plea on Facebook.
You wrote, "Plea for formula. I'm trying to keep Chloe out of the hospital. We're desperate."
Yeah. We had tried everything for her. Sorry. We need to have her on the most hypoallergenic formula to see if this will indeed help her to keep us out of the hospital.
Their dietitian at Medical University of South Carolina Children's Health says Chloe is one of at least 4 babies here, in part because of the formula shortage.
There was a family who tried to make homemade baby formula and did have to go to the pediatric ICU due to having some, that formula providing not enough of what a baby needed.
Google searches in the U.S. for homemade baby formula are up 250% over the last week. Recipes are circulating on YouTube.
We do not recommend that parents make their own formula.
It's not just in South Carolina.
This is a crisis for us in healthcare.
At Le Bonheur Children's Hospital in Tennessee, a preschooler and toddler with special dietary needs were hospitalized after their parents couldn't find the formula they normally take.
You had several weeks of stock. We're now out for the special formulas.
The House tonight expected to vote on a bill that would allow families receiving government support, called WIC, the flexibility to buy any brand of formula. By one estimate, up to 68% of all infant formula sold in the U.S. is purchased through WIC. But there's still confusion and stores with no supply. The White House sharply criticized today by members of its own party.
I give everybody an F on the entire spectrum of this, from the company itself, to the FDA oversight, to the interagencies who didn't talk to each other, to the entire problem. Nobody focused on this like they needed to.
People should also know is that from the president on down, everyone is laser focused on addressing this issue and every lever possible to do so. That's why we are working now to import formula from abroad, to get manufacturers to increase production here, to get the plant that was actually shut down back online quickly.
And Kate, there's some breaking news here tonight. The Senate wants to investigate the companies whose plant had to shut down, more or less triggering this crisis.
That's right. The Senate Finance Committee, Lester, the chairman, asking the formula manufacturer Abbott for information on its tax practices, conditions at that plant before it closed, and $8 billion in stock buybacks the company has authorized since 2019. And tomorrow, Lester, the FDA commissioner will be on Capitol Hill, sure to take some tough questions.
All right, Kate, thanks very much. I want to turn now, if I can, to Kristen Welker at the White House. Kristen, let's go back to this Defense Production Act decision. We've seen it used to deliver COVID supplies. How will the Biden administration use it this time?
Well, Lester, that's right. In this case, the president will direct manufacturers to prioritize key ingredients that are used to make baby formula so that suppliers can increase production as quickly as possible. Now, as for those flights that Kate mentioned to get baby formula from other countries, I am told they could start within days. The administration has been under enormous pressure to take these steps to address the baby formula crisis, particularly with the critical midterm elections looming. And overnight, there were several key races with a cliffhanger in Pennsylvania.
Tonight, the Trump effect on full display in battleground Pennsylvania, where they're still counting votes in the Republican Senate primary. Trump-backed celebrity doctor Mehmet Oz has a razor-thin lead over former hedge fund manager David McCormick, who also embraced the MAGA movement. The race is still too close to call. Dr. Oz lavishing praise on Mr. Trump overnight.
God bless you, sir, for putting so much effort into this race. I will make you proud.
A late surge by conservative commentator Kathy Barnett, another Trump supporter who attended the January 6th Stop the Steal rally, coming up short. The winner of the race will face off against the Democratic nominee, progressive Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman, who's recovering from a stroke. Late today, Mr. Trump saying on social media, Dr. Oz should declare victory. It makes it much harder for them to cheat with the ballots that they just happened to find. Trump offering no evidence to back that up. The former president falsely declared victory on election night in 2020, a race he ultimately lost.
Frankly, we did win this election.
Overall, it was a mixed night for Mr. Trump, and candidates who he endorsed who also supported his so-called Stop the Steal efforts. Some were victorious, like State Senator Doug Mastriano, who won the GOP nod for governor in Pennsylvania, and North Carolina Congressman Ted Budd, who beat out former Governor Pat McCrory for the GOP Senate nomination.
And friends, I want to thank President Donald J. Trump.
Budd was among the House members who voted against certifying the 2020 election. But in Idaho, Republican Governor Brad Little beat out Trump-backed Lieutenant Governor Janice McGeachin, who claimed Trump won the 2020 election and has called for audits of every state's voter rolls. And the former president's endorsement wasn't enough to secure a victory for pro-Trump firebrand Congressman Madison Cawthorn, who lost after being besieged by scandals. Kristen Welker, NBC News, the White House.
Now to alarming developments in the COVID pandemic. The CDC now saying a third of Americans live in high-risk areas and is urging them to mask up indoors regardless of local rules. The CDC also says daily COVID cases have tripled in the last month. And hospitalizations are up nearly 20% in the last week. And Health and Human Services Secretary Javier Becerra has tested positive on a trip to Germany. His office says Becerra is fully vaccinated and boosted and has mild symptoms. Also tonight, new details in the Buffalo mass shooting, revealing more about the suspect's behavior leading up to the rampage. And a 911 dispatcher on leave accused of hanging up on a store employee as the shooting unfolded. Emily Iketa is in Buffalo for us.
Tonight, another top store employee describing a chilling encounter with the 18-year-old suspect the day before the shooting. Police saying he planned his hate-fueled rampage for months.
I had met him in the meat department area and asked him could he leave the store, that he can't be soliciting in the store.
Chanel Harris-Teague telling our Buffalo station WGRZ she had no idea she'd see him the next day, too.
I could still hear the gun shooting, people screaming, people crying.
Jerome Bridges was also inside.
As I was barricading the door, I heard more gunshots. He kept getting closer and closer and closer to that back room.
People hiding anywhere they could in an act of desperation. One employee calling for help, but she says only to be hung up on by the 911 operator.
Why are you whispering? You don't have to whisper. And I'm trying to tell her, like, ma'am, he's in the store, he's shooting. And she said something crazy to me, and then she hung up in my face.
Erie County says immediate action was taken, and the individual who took that call is now on administrative leave.
You've been charged with multiple counts of murder.
Tonight, investigators zeroing in on the suspect's digital footprint. NBC News has reviewed a series of online rants, which appear to be written by the suspect, including references to the threatening statement he allegedly made in school last year, for which police sent him to a mental health evaluation. The suspect writing it lasted just 15 minutes, that he lied and said the threat was a joke. Tonight, New York's Attorney General says the social media sites the suspect frequented will now face an investigation. Lester?
Emily Iketa, thank you. Tonight, Russia's victory in Mariupol appears to be complete, with nearly 1,000 more Ukrainian soldiers surrendering at that steel plant. This as the first Russian soldier tried for war crimes has pleaded guilty. Richard Engel is in Ukraine, and we have to warn you, some of the images you're about to see are disturbing.
Ukrainian rescue crews today saved a 9-year-old boy after a Russian strike on an apartment building in the eastern region known as the Donbass. Russia is now concentrating its military efforts there after taking over Mariupol this week. But elsewhere, Russia's war is faltering again. Today, the U.S. reopened its embassy in Kyiv, where Ukrainian troops drove Russian forces back 2 months ago. Now, Ukraine is pushing the Russians back from the eastern capital, Kharkiv. In the nearby village of Olhovka, all that's left of the Russian troops is the devastation they brought. Shockingly, some Ukrainians stayed here throughout the battles, including Nikolai, living in the wreck of his home, having survived on canned food and pickles. What happened here? The Russians came and said they were liberating us, he says. Next door, Tatiana, a teacher, stayed, but not her husband. He took up the Russians' offer to go to Russia to escape the shelling. Tatiana chose her country over her husband, and she's unsure if she'll ever see him again.
Do you think you made the right choice?
I love my husband, but I also love my land and my country, so I stayed. And now investigators have a whole new region to search for evidence of Russian war crimes.
The first Russian soldier on trial here for a war crime today pleaded guilty to killing a Ukrainian civilian outside of Kyiv. He faces up to life imprisonment. Lester?
All right, Richard Engel in Ukraine, thanks. New concerns over soaring inflation sent the stock market plunging again today. The Dow losing more than 1,100 points, its worst decline in almost 2 years. The S&P was off more than 4% and the NASDAQ almost 5%. The sell-off follows disappointing earnings from large retailers hurt by rising costs and sluggish sales. In 60 seconds, our in-depth look at the federal criminal investigation of Hunter Biden's taxes and his work overseas, and how the president's son paid off a $2 million tax bill.
It's easy to think that all money managers are pretty much the same, but at Fisher Investments, we're clearly different.
The compounding problems create a perfect storm for President Biden. Just a few hours ago, he invoked the Defense Production Act to make more baby formula, but it still could be weeks for the store shelves to get restocked, literally. At every turn, Mr. Biden faces a problem needing presidential attention. Here is the president's problem list, in his own words, in just the past 6 weeks.
And I've directed my team to do everything possible to ensure there's enough safe baby formula. This is one of my top priorities. I'm taking inflation very seriously, and it's my top domestic priority. I will do everything in my power to limit the pain the American people are feeling at the gas pump. This is critical to me. Everything in their power to expand quality and affordable health care coverage. We're going to continue to deliver critical support to Ukraine.
Well, the old saying goes, if you want something done, ask a busy person. But at least so far, everything on that list to get fixed is getting worse. Congressman John Garamendi, Democrat of California, is...
Southeastern Carolina will see better sunshine to the west, but our highs on Saturday only in the mid-50s. Then on Sunday, partly cloudy. Again, temperatures in the mid-30s in the morning, and during the afternoon, only a little warmer, upper 50s to the
in Delaware investigating Hunter Biden and whether he broke federal tax law. Now, a representative for Mr. Biden tells NBC News his bill from the IRS, about $2 million, has been paid off. Two people familiar with the matter say the money was arranged by one of the younger Biden's new attorneys, Hollywood lawyer Kevin Morris, best known for brokering a deal for the South Park TV show.
Does paying that tax bill wash away any liability that Hunter Biden may have now?
Paying the tax bill, if in fact that's what he did, doesn't undo the crime. It would be like returning money to a bank that you robbed. You still robbed the bank.
The president's son and his company brought in about $11 million between 2013 and 2018, including some years in which his father was vice president, working as an attorney, a board member to a Ukrainian gas company accused of bribing a prosecutor, and for a joint venture involving a Chinese businessman now accused of fraud, according to an NBC News analysis of a copy of Biden's hard drive and iCloud account, as well as documents released by a Senate committee. During the campaign, then-candidate Joe Biden denied his son profited off a China connection.
My son has not made money in terms of this thing about, what are you talking about, China.
The records show Hunter Biden's company received nearly $5 million in consulting contracts from that joint venture funded by a Chinese energy company. A snapshot of Hunter Biden's spending shows that for about 5 months in late 2017 and early 2018, he spent more than $200,000 a month on things like luxury hotel rooms, cash withdrawals, dental work, and payments on a Porsche, according to documents on the hard drive, a time period in which Hunter Biden has acknowledged struggling with drug addiction.
The immediate focus appears to be for both the president and Hunter Biden is whether or not there'll be any charges as a result of this federal criminal investigation.
Hunter Biden's laptop, a subject of controversy after documents recovered from it were brought to light by the Biden's political opponents, with some cybersecurity experts at one point in 2020 suggesting it bore hallmarks of a Russian disinformation campaign. Since then, several news organizations have authenticated many emails from the laptop, and NBC News obtained a copy of the hard drive from a representative for Rudy Giuliani. The president has defended his son.
Are you confident you did nothing wrong?
I'm confident.
And Hunter Biden has denied any illegal business dealings.
I'm cooperating completely, and I am absolutely certain, 100% certain, that at the end of the investigation, that I will be cleared of any wrongdoing.
Experts point out family members of a president who hold no official job in the administration are not bound by any government ethics rules.
Hunter Biden seems a lot like somebody whose primary profession is being Joe Biden's son. But unless there's a direct connection to Joe Biden, that's really more of a criticism of one private citizen rather than a government official or an administration.
Hunter Biden's attorney did not comment on the record, and the White House has not responded to our request for comment. Lester?
Hallie, thank you. Up next, game changer for women in professional soccer, the historic shift in how American athletes are paid.
Since I left for college,
Falls and Adrian, Minnesota for tomorrow. Scattered showers and storms in the morning, then a few developing later in the afternoon, but better chances to our east into Minnesota and Iowa. Dry, breezy, colder on Friday, only 50s Saturday. Look at those lows getting to 30 Saturday morning, Sunday morning, and then we'll try to warm things up with
humidifies your room. Plus, our True Shield filter removes.
Turn out that their vote is actually going to matter.
Well, it's only the middle of May, a long way to go, but we do have some new numbers to look at, and we thank you both for helping us understand what's going on. Aaron Haynes, Dave Wasserman, thank you so much.
thank you.
Thank you.
Abortion access is now a key issue in races across the country since news that the Supreme Court seems to be on the verge of overturning Roe v. Wade. But the stakes are especially high in Pennsylvania, where two candidates with sharply divided stances on the issue will face off for governor in an election that will likely determine abortion law in the state. Lisa Desjardins is back now with some time she spent with voters and advocates across the political spectrum about how this issue is shaking up the race.
In Pennsylvania, energy and opportunity on both sides of one of the most divisive issues in politics.
It's a beautiful day.
At the state capitol, they are gathering.
We've been put on notice. Everybody has been put on notice.
Fired up and posters in tow, Kelly Davis is heading to the State House.
We're in a watershed moment again.
She leads New Voices for Reproductive Justice, an advocacy group focused on the health of Black women and queer people. In the wake of the leaked Supreme Court opinion, she sees that at risk and her state as a battleground.
Americans generally think about abortion access or abortion restrictions. They think that this is a Southern issue. Oh, that's Mississippi. Oh, that's Louisiana. Oh, that's Alabama. But the truth is the most draconian legislation around abortion restrictions was proposed right here in this state.
She means the Casey v. Planned Parenthood case. The 1992 Supreme Court decision blocked Pennsylvania restrictions and upheld a national right to abortion. If abortion becomes a state-by-state issue, 26 states would likely ban or could impose new restrictions. Pennsylvania is not one of them. The future of the issue here is to be determined and to be fought. Both sides in the debate have made the state a focal point. This weekend, hundreds who want to keep abortion legal rallied passionately on the steps of the Capitol, where Kelly delivered a call to action.
Fight on and know deep down we will win!
Oh, I'm absolutely going to vote.
We're tired of this. We're ready to be heard.
You know, there's all this talk about, well, what will happen in Texas, what will happen in Oklahoma? It's going to happen here in Pennsylvania. It's going to happen next year if we don't still have a Democratic governor.
Under current Pennsylvania law, abortion is legal up to 24 weeks of pregnancy. But there is no question the Republican legislature here wants to change that.
Abortion access in Pennsylvania will remain legal and safe as long as I am governor.
So far, Democratic Governor Tom Wolf has stood in the way, vetoing 3 anti-abortion bills sent to his desk. But he is term limited and leaving office, leaving voters with a stark, high-stakes choice about who will succeed him.
Your rights are on the line.
On the left, Attorney General Josh Shapiro ran unopposed in the primary. He's best known for investigating abuse in the Catholic Church and defeating the Trump campaign's voter fraud claims. He understands abortion is part of his race.
The next governor will have on his desk a bill that bans abortion in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I will veto that bill when it hits my desk.
Shapiro is trying to expand the Democratic map, campaigning here at a brewery in deep red Huntington County. His focus is on keeping abortion access where it is now.
I want to protect Pennsylvania law, but I also want to protect the fundamental freedoms of Pennsylvanians to be able to make decisions over their own bodies.
The 4 Republican candidates
On the right, the crowded Republican field for governor was united on abortion, backing a total or near total ban.
I have made exceptions for rape, incest, and the life of the mother.
Rape, incest, and for the life of the mother only.
I would not have any exceptions.
I don't give way for exceptions either.
Yesterday, Republicans chose one of their most conservative candidates, State Senator Doug Mastriano, bolstered by a last-minute endorsement from former President Donald Trump. Mastriano is a consistent, ardent firebrand who recently shut out most press, including us, from campaign events. He falsely denies the 2020 election results and attended the January 6th pro-Trump rally in Washington.
We're here to change the course of history.
He is one of the state's loudest voices against legal abortion, sponsoring a ban starting around 5 or 6 weeks of pregnancy before many women know they're pregnant.
We turn our backs on the most vulnerable, those who don't have a voice, and let them be massacred in the womb.
To what degree do you think this governor's race will determine the future of abortion in Pennsylvania?
I think it's the most important race that we have right now.
Marlene Downing is part of an invigorated anti-abortion movement. A native Pennsylvanian, she is a longtime believer that life begins at conception and previously ran a crisis pregnancy center. Now she works for the Susan B. Anthony List, a national anti-abortion group. Today they're in a key Philly suburb, knocking on doors. They aim to have personal conversations about abortion and hand out literature telling voters to reject candidates who support abortion rights, like Shapiro.
I'm Marlene with Susan B. Anthony List.
They found Adele Deegan-Tyndall at her door.
I have 3 boys, and we were all literally just having this conversation in the kitchen the other night because of what's happening with the Supreme Court.
She's a former Democrat who wants more abortion restrictions.
I do believe in a woman's choice in certain instances, but I believe in the baby. Who stands up for the baby?
Marlene says that's why she's here, and she has noticed a change in the past 2 weeks.
Prior to the leak, going to the doors, I've had people say, you know, abortion is not really on the top of my list. I haven't heard that lately.
The two sides are intensely jockeying, but we found voters in the middle.
I do believe it's the right of women to choose for their own body, but I think there should be limitations.
Denise Donlin is a registered Republican and mother who sympathizes with people at all stages in this debate.
Anyone going through an abortion is a very hard thing. It's a very tough thing to have to live with that for the rest of your life. But I think that you have to do what's right for you. But there should be still some limitations.
What would you like to see change in Pennsylvania on abortion? Would you like more restrictions than now?
I would like to see 15 weeks as more of a restriction.
But on the ballot for governor will be a Republican who wants a near ban on abortion and a Democrat who wants to preserve current law at 24 weeks. Katie Meyer covers politics for Public Media's WHYY.
Maybe there's voters who would like to see a middle ground. Maybe that's where more voters actually are, even in the Republican Party. But that's has not been on the table.
What is on the table for Pennsylvania are difficult, intense months ahead over abortion.
I think that this has the potential to unify, at least on this one issue, certain subsets of society who previously thought of as having political agendas that were at odds.
On both sides, the people that are for abortion and against abortion will actually make that an important topic for them because they know that something very important to the people.
It's charging up everyone.
It's charging up everyone.
The abortion issue is already electric, and the Supreme Court has yet to issue its final opinion.
And Lisa has since returned from Pennsylvania. She joins us now. So Lisa, in your reporting, you are noting what you called an intense political charge running through this debate. Did you get any sense that these disagreements might actually turn physical?
Not yet, but we did pick up on some notable changes here. Kelly Davis, who runs New Voices for Reproductive Justice, told me that since the leaked opinion came out, she and her staff have seen a very marked uptick in racial slurs hurled at them, racist language at them in person when they go to the door, as well as online. She says that they are now putting in place different kind of security protocols when they are out there trying to do their outreaches. And she says that this is the first time she's really felt a hovering threat to her safety. At the same time, I also want to show you a photo of something that I saw at that rally in favor of abortion rights on the step of the Capitol. That is Judge Alito's, what is blurred out there is Justice Alito's home address. This same person also had a sign on the back of that sign was Justice Kavanaugh's home address, which also, of course, we have blurred out. So this shows that the fight has become personal at people in leadership roles, and we know that justices on the Supreme Court, there is a sense that they need more security right now around the building itself. And I think that we're in a charged atmosphere. As everyone knows, charged air can be dangerous. So the words that everyone on all sides uses and their actions going forward really will matter on how this goes.
Such important.
A group of lunch ladies making sure fun is always on the menu. Kristen Dahlgren, NBC News.
It's a lot of fun. That's Nightly News for this Wednesday. Thank you for watching. I'm Lester Holt. Please take care of yourself and each other. Good night.
NBC News, streaming free now.
You got shot!
You only saw one entry wound and one exit wound, right? Yeah.
NATO officials believe Ukraine could retake control of Crimea and the Donbass territories that Russia has already seized. That, of course, could be an existential crisis for Vladimir Putin, but it comes as more critics of Putin go public in Russia. Matthew Chance is out front.
Defenders of Ukraine turned prisoners of war. Latest images released by the Russian military of Ukrainian forces surrendering after their defiant stand. Some limping with wounds or exhaustion. As one of this conflict's most grueling battles at the Azovstal steelworks in Mariupol finally draws to a close. Nearly 1,000 Ukrainians have surrendered so far, Russia's defense ministry spokesman announces triumphantly, before detailing Russia's latest rocket attacks and what he says are US-supplied weapons on the battlefield. As ever, no hint of any problems or setbacks in what Russia still refuses to even call a war. Shocking then that Kremlin-controlled television would allow Russia's special military operation to be ripped apart on air by a respected military commentator and former Russian colonel who pulls no punches. Let's not take information tranquilizers, the retired colonel advises, and pretend Ukraine's armed forces are nearing a crisis of morale, because that's not even close to reality, he says. The pro-Kremlin anchor pushes back, saying there have been individual cases that show otherwise. But the colonel is insistent. With European military aid now coming into full effect, he says, 1 million Ukrainian soldiers could soon join the fight. While frankly, the situation for Russia, he says, will get worse. It is scathing. But he went on. We are geopolitically isolated. The whole world is against us, even if we don't want to admit it, he says, telling millions of Russians who get their news from this state channel what many of them given the international sanctions on Russia, must already suspect. Recent days have seen the official veil of denial slipped too. Like when the pro-Kremlin Chechen leader, whose forces have been fighting in Ukraine, tried to tell Russian students what's really going on there. We're fighting Ukrainian nationalists backed by NATO, and the West is arming them, he says. That's why our country is finding it so difficult there, he reveals. Though it's a good experience, he says. Not the experience, though, Vladimir Putin, who presided over a slightly muted annual Victory Day parade earlier this month, is likely to have expected when he sent his troops across the border. Russia hasn't lost its latest war, but expectations of a quick and easy win are being rowed back. Well, Erin, tonight that same retired colonel has again appeared on Russian state television, but this time there's a marked difference in his tone. Take a close listen.
When people talk about Ukraine acquiring the ability to counterattack, well, it's a big exaggeration. And as concerns the actions of our Supreme Command, there is every reason to believe that the implementation of these plans will in the very near future give Ukraine an unpleasant surprise.
Well, there you have it. After that controversial outburst the night before on state television, the retired colonel is tonight much more supportive of the Russian government and much more critical of Ukraine's military performance. Erin.
Matthew Chance, thank you very much. And I want to go now to Ian Bremmer, president of Eurasia Group and author of the new book, The Power of Crisis, which I have one here. So, Ian, okay, let's talk about this because earlier in the day, we were talking about the colonel, like, it's an incredible moment. I would encourage everybody to watch it in full.
State media.
State media. And you have them keep pushing back. No. Russia's doing great. And he's like, no, you got to be realistic. And now it's as if he said the sky was blue, and now the sky is purple again.
And I told you before he came out the second time that I thought that this was enormously unusual. I was surprised he was still going to be on the air again. Because in Russia, you just don't come out like that. And, of course, what we've just seen in the last hour is that literally he's a different human being, his next appearance on Russian state television.
I mean, it is incredible to see it. What do you read into it, though, to the fact that he even said that at all, and then he comes back?
It was live.
Yeah.
It was live. He is a respected military analyst, a former colonel who had been saying before the war that it was a bad idea, and it was, again, live television, and I think that they the anchor was surprised, and they weren't ready to push back, and obviously they didn't have sufficient level of immediate censorship to shut them down, but they got to him, and, you know, it's very clear that it's not acceptable. People have gone to jail for less in the last 2 months in Russia.
But it's just stunning in terms of what it says that somebody could, you know, I don't want to say lose his cool, or maybe it was very planned, who knows, but there was an avenue for that to happen at that moment. You know, in your book, you talk about several crucial things that are shaping the world, and one of them, of course, is Russia and Putin. So when you see this narrative out there that NATO's saying, oh gosh, Ukraine's doing so well, they could even take Crimea, obviously on the ground there are others who are saying absolutely nothing of the sort is occurring. Russia, in fact, has solidified some of that, even though the Ukrainians are doing well in other areas like Kharkiv. How close to a worst-case scenario is this war right now for Putin?
It's close to about as badly as it could possibly go for Putin. This war has been going on since February 24th, and literally every week since then, things for Putin have deteriorated. The level of military support for Ukraine has increased every week, from defensive to offensive weapons from more countries increasing. Remember, it wasn't going to be tanks, now it's tanks.
Right.
The military, the intelligence support he's getting real time on the disposition of Russian forces on the ground from the US, from the UK, from others, has been increasing every single week. And the level of sanctions, the punishment that has been served against Russia, the freezing of his assets, first time it's ever happened for a G20 economy. The fact that SWIFT, they're being removed from SWIFT. First it's, you know, a bunch of oligarchs, the banking system, then it's coal, now it's oil, soon it's gas.
Is it yet the existential crisis, though, that puts him in the corner of horrific things.
Look, in fact, I would say it's quite the opposite, and I do say this in my book. I mean, what the interesting thing is Putin didn't believe any of this was possible. He thought the West was in disarray, Biden was weak, Merkel was gone, Macron was going his own way. Trump had said NATO was obsolete. Macron said it was brain dead. So he's all in. He didn't think it was possible that the West could come back from that invasion.
So you see the optimism.
And actually what's happened is today, you know what happened, in addition to what we've just been talking about, Finland and Sweden formally apply to NATO. And the fact is the Ukrainians are doing better. NATO is stronger than it was before. And even in the United States, where everyone hates each other, the one thing we agree on is that first Pelosi and then McConnell both make the exact same trip to Kiev to show their support for Ukraine. It's the power of crisis.
And you talk about, you know, 3 threats. One of them, of course, is the pandemic as well. And I'm curious about the overlay between that and Russia and what we're seeing with Putin. Because, you know, he did this, and all those things come into it. But it was also in the light of all these images we saw, you know, that big, long table, and nobody could be around him, and he wouldn't talk to his advisors, and this complete and utter isolation, which is related to the COVID crisis. How much of an impact has COVID had on Putin?
It's clearly unhelpful that this is a man who has not been able to go around and talk to military troops in the field as they were training for what this invasion was going to be. Look, I think that there are lots of reasons why Putin, no matter what, COVID or not, clearly would have made the decision he made to invade, because he did see winter's here, there's all of this, and all these other things came together. But the one thing that he had absolutely no assessment of is he really didn't believe the Ukrainians were going to fight. And I think that if there had been better communication, he would have gotten more of that. Remember, he only had 190,000 troops on the border. I say only because that's fewer than the Ukrainian troops in the field. And no one would say you'd go in if you had 2 or 3 to 1, but not 0.8 to 1 in terms of troops.
No.
Remember, he calls it a special military operation, not a war. We say that's propaganda. In reality, Putin believed it wasn't a war because he believed the Ukrainians weren't going to fight.
Right, and he was going to be welcomed. Yes, there is, right. And I think that's a really important thing to say as to why he's saying it's not just propaganda. All right, well, I hope everyone will read this because you do talk about the threats, climate change also on the list. Ian, thank you so much, and I really appreciate it. Power of crisis. And next, the suspected gunman in the deadly shooting in Buffalo revealed his plot in a private chat room just 30 minutes before he opened fire. And the plane crash, the one that, you know, straight down, is apparently not an accident. The Wall Street Journal reports U.S. officials say someone in the cockpit did it on purpose, did it intentionally.
Get out. And every administration wanted to get out. And the strategy was based on getting out in the next 2 years. And what happens is you ignore things like developing the operation.
Face, not so much. Companies like Meta or Facebook or whatever we're calling this thing now are taking this data, and then other companies are using it, giving it to governments, giving it to police departments, and then people are being able to be found through this facial data.
So when you go on and you have the privacy tab and you say, don't share my data, and then you move on with life, they still share your data?
Well, first of all, you don't always have the choice to say, don't share my data. When you use Instagram, you are giving up your data. And you're also giving up your data to all of these other companies that are then scraping it. There's Clearview AI. They take billions of social media photos that they are using for facial recognition. And they work with police departments, Chicago, Dallas, LA, Baltimore, to take unidentified people. We saw it with the January 6th riots, find out who they are based upon their social media posts. This is happening all over the place. And it's why some lawsuit by Texas against Facebook, Meta, is totally irrelevant. It's just for political clout, which is Ken Paxton is having a lot of political issues, or it's for money. The Illinois was for $650 million for a class action lawsuit. Meta is not what we should be worried about. It's all of these other companies that are using it, and the police departments, our own government, that is using this to then charge people with crimes.
Okay, so I'm thinking about how this works. What I'm understanding from you is that the police departments get around getting warrants or everything else because they're just buying the data from Facebook and Instagram and everybody else. is the cat out of the bag? I mean, you and I have had some filters made here, evidently, that they were kind enough to do for us. So now, can anybody run facial recognition on us based on surveillance cameras?
The cat's out of the bag in the sense that your photos are out there, and there's really nothing you can do. Yeah, they're out there. But are we in cat photos?
Yes,
I can't
we
see
have
it.
cats.
But we have cats. The filters are out of the bag, okay, in that sense. Here's what's not out of the bag. The government being allowed to use this. Right now, the government is allowed to use facial recognition software in order to charge people with crimes and find people who they are then going to charge with crimes. That's wrong, and that's what needs to be banned immediately. Many cities are already doing it, but that is what needs to be banned immediately before more people's rights are violated.
As I understand it, and as good as you are in writing the algorithms and other folks are in studying them, and we put up sort of how this works, there's been a lot of cases of mistaken identity using this technology. It's far from perfect to take somebody's face who they did an Instagram filter or whatever and then run it through surveillance video and find the match. I mean, I could be whoever this actor is.
Right, even some of the best facial recognition systems are only about 90% accurate, which sounds like a lot. But if you have 1 million people, that means the 10% that aren't accurate, that's 100,000 times where the match is wrong. That's a lot of times to go arrest someone, to go scare someone. There was a guy, Robert Williams in Detroit, who was detained for 30 hours. He was arrested on his front lawn in front of his 2 daughters, detained for 30 hours, and he'd never been within 40 miles of the place he supposedly committed this crime. So you can be highly accurate, but that inaccuracy can be a huge number at the same time.
So where is the difference between the lawsuits by the states to stop this, which, as you point out, is either money or politically motivated, not motivated to protect us? How do we get from there to actually protecting us from the government doing bad things, because we know Facebook's already going to sell our stuff?
The laws need to be changed where you cannot have police departments, you cannot have the IRS, you cannot have the United States government using facial recognition systems in order to get citizens. That is the problem. The cat's out of the bag. Your data's there. We just need to stop the government from using it.
Paging Josh Hawley. We'll see if he's listening. Liberty, thank you very much. We appreciate it. We're going to now destroy all these pictures.
Thank you.
All right, coming up. One Russian colonel tells the truth about Putin's war. He did it on state TV. How long before he ends up in the gulag?
I'm Allison Harris. You're watching called Moderate. That tells you what you need to know about Joe Biden's power. But Jesse, revealing poll by the DCCC, which showed that these vulnerable Democrats, the most vulnerable Democrats, they are 21.8% higher in their approval than President Biden. Think about that, 20% points higher than the sitting president for vulnerable Democrats. I'm pretty sure they're going to be shunning him as much as they can.
Yeah, that's a big drag right there.
The point where the Associated Press did a poll with NORC, and they released a study called Immigration Attitudes and Conspiracy Thinkers. Among those ranked high in conspiratorial thinking, 42% of those agreed a group of people are trying to replace native-born Americans, and that native-born Americans are losing economic, political, and cultural influence to immigrants, compared to 8% of low conspiracy thinkers. And the belief in replacement theory is much higher among viewers of OANN, Newsmax, and Fox. So there is statistical proof that their viewers are the ones most likely to believe this stuff.
Well, and this is what happens when an entire political party cedes their public square to this toxic brand of idiocy and racism. This is the end result of that. And that's why I say, you know, a lot of this has been normalized right before our very eyes. I go back to remember when Donald Trump referred to immigrants from S-hole countries, and how in the Republican world, that was met with laughter, as a joke, shrugging their shoulders. It's just how he talks, no big deal. But really what that was a smoke signal to their audience, to their voters, to their base, that it's okay to talk like that, to think like that brown people are indeed drug dealers and rapists coming from the border to invade all of us. We have watched this normalization in slow motion happen before our very eyes for the last 5 years, and now it is culminating with violence and mayhem, and it's just the beginning, Joy. It is only going to get worse as long as the Republican Party and their leadership double down on it.
Absolutely. It's a national security threat. It's not just that they're trying to ban books and ban history. They're pushing a dangerous conspiracy theory that breeds violence. And Rupert Murdoch isn't going to do a damn thing about it because he's making money off of it. That doesn't seem right to me. We'll see what happens with this letter that Chuck Schumer has sent to Fox News. Probably nothing. Kurt Bardella, thank you very much, my friend. Appreciate you. Before we go, next week marks 2 years since the senseless killing of George Floyd. Today, Thomas Lane, one of the former Minneapolis police officers who was charged in connection with Floyd's death, pled guilty to a state charge of aiding and abetting second-degree manslaughter. The state and Lane's attorney are recommending a sentence of 3 years. Lane had already been convicted in a federal trial in February of violating Floyd's civil rights. He has not yet been sentenced in that case. Meanwhile, there is new reporting about the night that police killed Breonna Taylor, part of a blockbuster expose on the Louisville Police Department by Vice News. The correspondent who's breaking that story joins me tonight. We'll be right back.
Hi, Phil Swift here. People everywhere tell me how much they love.
Continues to push them further and further east of I-29. Wind gets light tonight, same story for tomorrow morning, but it kind of ramps up out of the south to start the day, quickly becomes northwesterly behind the front coming in. And by the way, Friday and Saturday, much cooler air will be with us. Futurecast kind of drying out for tonight, temporarily clearing out, but then we start to see showers and thunderstorms return tomorrow morning. This is round one, light shower and thunderstorm activity, not the severe weather threat we're tracking. We'll clear out for the noon hour, but then we'll start to see those showers and thunderstorms develop further and further east of I-29. This particular model has it well off to our east, and that's kind of, again, been the trend. We're going to see better ingredients off in that direction, but we will still see some showers moving through even tomorrow evening and into very early Friday morning. Friday overall looking to be mostly cloudy. Clouds will be clearing it later on that night. We do have a risk for severe weather, as we mentioned. It's mainly along and east of I-29, but the trend, again, kind of is making it go a little bit further off to the east. So still in Minnesota and Iowa. That's why we have that first alert weather day, because of that slight risk for severe weather. The next 10 days in Sioux Falls, mid-80s tomorrow. All of a sudden, we're falling to the low 60s on Friday. We'll be in the mid-50s, even cooler on Saturday. And then next week, we have rain chances building in for the start of next week. In Aberdeen, our concern over the weekend will be some areas of frost. Morning lows on Saturday and Sunday morning will be in the mid-30s. Now, you'll see some showers and storms come through tomorrow, but you'll avoid that severe weather threat, and will slowly warm up throughout next week. And in Pierre, low 70s tomorrow, mid to upper 50s Friday and Saturday. Areas of frost for you as well, with those morning lows down in the mid-30s. But otherwise, we'll slowly warm up next week as we start out the week with rain chances and temperatures in the 60s. We'll be in the 70s by the end of next week. Stick around. Dakota News Now will continue right after the break.
The only
kind of makes the people jump off the canvas and bedazzle you. The photographs, they also have that mesmerizing, riveting presence.
From his earliest days growing up in North Philadelphia, Hendricks walked the city with a camera around his neck. But it was during his travels throughout Europe in 1966 when the then 21-year-old artist saw and photographed work that would change his life, paintings by the old masters.
He also knew his art history really, really well. For example, in this self-portrait, when you see the way he's dressed and the way he gestures, you immediately think of Velázquez in Las Meninas, or his self-portrait in a hub. The hub becomes a convex mirror, and it recalls Van Eyck's Arnolfini wedding portrait or Parmigianino's self-portrait in a convex mirror.
Hendricks found the museum paintings riveting for their beauty, but striking for their lack of blackness.
He decided that his role would be to bring his people, his friends, his family, himself, bring them visibility.
He also turned the gaze on himself, occasionally in nude self-portraits. He titled this painting Brilliantly Endowed, after a 1977 New York Times review labeled him, quote-unquote,
brilliantly endowed, meaning as a painter. But of course, all the tropes of the hypersexuality of black men and what that means.
So you see him playing with visibility, hypervisibility, and invisibility in these various ways that I think in a post-2020 US is very important for us to think about how black and brown people come into view.
Elian Janine Hill, the show's co-curator, is talking about this photograph, in which Hendricks proudly wears the banner of Superman just as he disappears behind sunglasses, and all while nude from the waist down.
I think part of the revelation of what he's doing in photography is that we get to see the world through his eyes, in a sense. He's central. We don't get to kind of push him to the side and make our own assumptions.
Hendricks bristled at assumptions, especially when his work was labeled political.
What did he have to contend with there when people would use that word over and over again?
Yeah, I think people often used the word as a way to dismiss his work as doing only one thing, when what he was really doing was showing this deep complexity of the people he saw around him, but also of the nation that he lived in.
A nation where he saw Anita Hill fashioned as a pariah, where space was made for the Ku Klux Klan and the Confederate flag was embraced.
He's building in these contrasts. He has images of Confederate flags, him trying to understand the political tensions in the US. But then I also noticed in Passion Dance Hall, #1, which is an image of a man and woman dancing, and it's Jamaican dance hall. And the colors in it are the colors of the Pan-African flag, or the Black Liberation flag.
Hendricks seemed to revel in life's pleasures, in togetherness, in the personality of pumps and the portability of musical play in boomboxes, all signs he recorded as the beauty in life.
There's a lot of sensuality in the beauty that he portrays. That for me brings to mind the portrait of Vendetta. She's nude, she's sitting in lotus position. Her body forms these angles that are like almost star-like.
Not to mention a mechanism, like the mechanical sketchbook, for seeing the world with the widest possible lens. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Jared Bowen in Waltham, Massachusetts.
And a news update before we go. President Biden is invoking the Defense Production Act to boost the supply of baby formula that has grown so hard to find in recent months. The move directs the federal government to prioritize key ingredients for formula production and compels suppliers to provide resources to formula makers. Mr. Biden also launched a program that will use Defense Department aircraft to import formula from overseas. And that is the NewsHour for tonight. I'm Judy Woodruff. Join us online and again here tomorrow evening. For all of us at the PBS NewsHour, thank you. Please stay safe, and we'll see you soon.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by...
For 25 years, Consumer Cellular's goal has been to provide wireless service that helps people communicate and connect. We offer a variety of no-contract plans, and our U.S.-based customer service team can help find one that fits you. To learn more, visit consumercellular.tv.
The Ford Foundation, working with visionaries on the front lines of social change worldwide.
Your weight, he's being prejudiced. No, he's being a doctor. So if you want to use the word obesity, you're oversold.
I struggled with my weight growing up, too. Yeah. I was too skinny. And I remember without my football pads on, I had no shirt. I was walking to football practice, and one of the bigger kids yelled out the window, "Put it back in the cage." Yeah. Because I had a bird chest.
Yeah, you were
and it scarred me, and I never walked around with my shirt off again. I was so thin.
I've heard different stories from gut.
We don't need to go there. All right, up next, one of the main characters on the show Family Guy is apparently going through some changes.
I'm having my period. It's like the shining elevator down there.
Stewie, trust me, boys can't get periods.
Brian, it's 2022. There's no such thing as a boy anymore, or a girl. Just a vast sea of chubby theys and thems, so coddled by their sanctimonious woke parents who think activism is virtue signaling on Instagram.
Maybe you are having your period.
Well, I mean, we just saw men can
Men can get pregnant.
Men can have abortions.
Having abortions.
So men can have periods.
I mean, the pattern that we've found and that we've seen through, we've culled through hundreds of internal documents, most of them which the public, hasn't previously seen, interviews of officers, we've spoken to victims, is using the power that a police officer has to hold charges over someone's head. For instance, after they've arrested a woman, to solicit sex from them, whether that's, any sort of sexual activity. And these women, some of whom we've spoken to, have expressed, how effective a police officer can be in wielding that power, because they have immense control over whether a charge is brought, whether a citation is handed in, and even what happens in the courtroom afterward.
Is there any evidence that the Department, Internal Affairs, or Daniel Cameron, who's again running for governor, has tried to investigate any of this?
The police department has fielded many complaints against police officers, and I don't think it's fair to say that they haven't tried to investigate, but what our reporting, we believe, has shown is that the efforts to investigate these complaints, especially when the initial complaints come in, have really fallen short. They have not brought officers in for interviews. They have waited to request certain evidence, like officers' phones, and in doing so, they've allowed some of these bad actors to continue acting unchecked and in some cases victimize more women.
Did you find evidence in your reporting that other officers who might know that these would really come down to sort of a crime ring or theft ring inside of the department and have tried to speak up, have felt intimidated or been afraid to come forward?
Oh, I mean, I can say with great certainty that there is a lot of pressure internally to not speak to the press. And I say this because many of our sources are current and former LMPD officers. I know that this afternoon, after press started coming out, an email was sent to the entire department by the public information officer reminding everyone that it is against policy to speak to the media and that all requests should go through them. So absolutely, there's a lot of pressure to not speak to people outside. There are people that really want to internally, but I think that part of this is a system problem.
Yeah.
A big part of this is a system problem.
And let me ask you this, because we know that departments, police departments around the country have chosen to settle and spend taxpayer money to pay when they kill people, unarmed people. This happens a lot. Have there been attempts in these cases to settle with people who've had their money stolen, to cover it up that way?
Well, in the local system there, plea deals are very common, and this is true around the country. So. And this is true in all sorts of cases. It's true in sexual assault cases involving police officers. It's true when someone's home is raided. And the plea deals end up, I think, allowing for pretty lenient sentencing of officers and for things not to be found out by the public.
Great reporting. Roberto Ferdman, thank you very much. You can see more of this terrific reporting on this two-part investigation tonight and tomorrow on Vice News. Please check it out on Vice TV. That's tonight's ReadOut. All in with Chris.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Believe it or not, in 1980, which wasn't that long ago, Venezuela was the richest country in Latin America. It had the highest wages, it had the best health care and education. It also had, by the standards of the region anyway, a famously stable democracy. Then came an energy crisis, and Venezuela wound up with inflation. At times, it reached 100% a year. Inflation makes people poor, so in a very short time, the poverty rate in Venezuela doubled. By 1995, 66% of all Venezuelans were impoverished. Getting poorer tends to make voters radical, so inevitably Venezuela got radical politics. You know what happened next. Venezuela is now rated one of the most miserable places on planet Earth. A few years ago, citizens in Caracas were reduced to eating zoo animals. There was no food, and for that matter, there was no electricity. So in just half a lifetime, an advanced society had reverted to the Stone Age. The United States is not in danger of becoming Venezuela next week, but we are moving closer to it. Inflation is a big part of the reason. Of all the economic crises a country can face, inflation is the most dangerous. Inflation doesn't just make people poor, It totally destroys their confidence in their leaders, the authorities who issued the now worthless currency they're using for toilet paper.
You are paying for. We've got some new video to share with you tonight, and this is from today, showing more migrants loaded onto planes and then taking off for destinations all across the country. Pennsylvania, Louisiana, Florida among the states receiving the migrants, and the list goes on from there. It is happening more often, with the number of migrants crossing into the U.S. at record numbers. The final destinations and then what happens to these migrants after they land in some of these new cities, that's proving a little bit more difficult to track. And the
tightened. The Oz campaign woke up this morning when the sun came up, and they were in a much stronger position than they are now as the sun goes down here in Pennsylvania. The latest count really at this moment is about 1,243 votes. That is the lead that the Oz campaign has over Dave McCormick. But this is far from over.
It's coming in right now. There were more shuttle buses that arrived throughout.
The Biden administration. She started Monday. Here were her first words from the podium.
I am obviously acutely aware that my presence at this podium represents a few firsts. I am a Black, gay, immigrant woman, the first of all three of those to hold this position.
So that was a little confusing. It wasn't actually about America, it was about her, but still, we learned that Karine Jean-Pierre is a Black lesbian, the first ever in history, she reminded us, to hold this particular job. Listen carefully. That shattering you hear in the background, it's 1,000 glass ceilings cracking simultaneously into millions of tiny pieces and then being swept by the custodians of tomorrow into the trash bin of bigotry and hate. Soon they'll be trucked to a landfill and buried. It's
in the insurrection about plans to overturn the results of the election. Mastriano introduced legislation to undo the certification of the 2020 election in Pennsylvania, which he called compromised and corrupt.
Governor Wolf didn't look into any allegations and blew them off. Secretary of State Booker blew off all the allegations of shenanigans. Our Attorney General, declared a winner before one vote was counted. And so the whole process has been corrupted. Nobody cares to see if there was shenanigans, cheating, fraud, and disenfranchisement. And so we're going to rise up and say, look, constitutionally, we have the final say on who the electors are.
Okay, to be clear here, that's all nonsense. The election was not compromised. There were no shenanigans in Pennsylvania. But Mastriano is saying we, meaning us in the state legislature, are going to throw out the votes of Pennsylvanians. We get to say, we the rulers, we the politicians tell the people who will rule them, and they can suck it up and take it. And in doing so, Mastriano was saying what Trump wanted to hear. In fact, Trump even promoted that clip you just saw on his official YouTube channel. But the legislation to decertify the election failed. And so Mastriano moved on to a new plan, auditing the election. He visited that bogus election audit in Arizona. He said it was something he wanted to emulate in his state of Pennsylvania.
If we're able to do an audit in Pennsylvania, that's the model I have. I think we just need to put everything to rest here by having one last look. We'll see what comes out of Arizona. Maybe as my governor and as my attorney general say, it was a perfect election. I mean, I doubt it. But with so many people raising questions, I don't know how you can press on without addressing that.
Of course, they did come out with their ridiculous audit, which said the election was free and fair and that Joe Biden won the state. Now, Mastriano was even subpoenaed by the January 6th committee for his role in helping Trump plan the coup. Subpoena reads, quote, "We would like to better understand events that you witnessed or in which you participated and the communications we believe you may have had with national, state, and local officials about the outcome of the November 2020 election." So this state representative, state senator, Doug Mastriano, who tried to decertify the election, who traveled to Arizona to tour that bogus election audit, who says he spoke to Trump more than a dozen times about the coup, who the January 6th committee says has information relevant to its investigation, and who didn't just go to the Ellipse rally, but then marched to the Capitol during the insurrection. He is now one of the two candidates in what is essentially a toss-up race to be governor of the state of Pennsylvania. He'll be facing off against the Attorney General, Josh Shapiro. And mark my words, Mastriano can win. Pennsylvania is a swing state. November is shaping up to be very tough sledding for Democrats. This guy could be in charge of the next election. And if a Democratic candidate for president wins Pennsylvania in 2024, well, what do you think is going to happen? Like, no one is hiding the ball here, right? Certainly seems likely that Governor Doug Mastriano would work to undermine that victory. And get this, it gets even worse because Pennsylvania is one of the states that allows the governor to appoint the Secretary of State, which means the person overseeing the election will be handpicked by the guy who tried to steal the last one, who says that the Democrats stole the 2020 election. In fact, Mastriano has already said whomever he picks for the job will be ordered to erase the state's voter rolls, requiring every Pennsylvanian who wants to vote in 2024 to re-register with the state. Again, no one's being subtle about this. Certainly not Mastriano and his allies.
Growing up in this country, there would come a time when they couldn't keep the lights on. Now that time is here. That's shocking. But if you're upset about it, we'd like you to pause and return your attention to the fact, and we're going to say this slowly so it can sink in, our new White House press secretary is a black lesbian. Oh, hooray! The White House press corps was duly impressed, tamed, in fact, which is the point of telling them that. But our Peter Doocy did have one question. What is the Biden administration doing about our collapsing economy, and how exactly is the plan to increase taxes on American citizens going to help them pay for things? Here's how Karine Jean-Pierre responded.
How does raising taxes on corporations reduce inflation?
Are you talking about a specific tweet?
He tweeted, "You want to bring down inflation, let's make sure the wealthiest corporations pay their fair share."
Look, you know, we have talked about this past year about making sure that the wealthiest among us are paying their fair share.
But how does raising taxes on corporations lower the cost of gas, the cost of a used car, the cost of food for everyday Americans?
So look, I think we encourage those who have done very well, right, especially those who care about climate change, to support a fair tax code that doesn't charge manufacturers, workers, cops, builders a higher percentage of their earnings, that the most fortunate people in our nation, and not let that stand in the way of reducing energy costs and fighting this existential problem, if you think about that as an example.
Now, you wouldn't have thought it was possible to take talking points that stupid, that barely literate, that childish, and make
concentrated manhunt in decades for Texas officials. The last one, you may remember, involved the infamous Texas 7. This is a group that evaded authorities for weeks in an intense search that would cross state lines eventually before they were caught. Well, tonight there is a growing chance that Gonzalo Lopez could be anywhere. Could be in Texas, could be in Mexico, who knows? Correspondent Marky Martin has an update tonight.
Yo, we saw the inmate. Oh my God. These are the moments just after Gonzalo Lopez escaped from a prison bus last Thursday afternoon. The video taken by a Texas mother and her son as they drove past the scene.
We still think he is in this area. We have no reason to believe that he is not in this area.
The manhunt has now entered day 7. Authorities releasing brand new images of Lopez. Almost immediately, Leon County was flooded with upwards of 300 law enforcement officers from agencies across the state. But the 46-year-old inmate has not been seen since fleeing into that field.
He's going to be out of food and he's going to make some mistakes.
Matt Fogg is a former U.S. Marshal. He thinks the odds Lopez is still within that 5 square mile perimeter that's being searched are slim but possible. More likely, he says, Lopez either stole a car or coordinated with someone to pick him up.
The Mexican mafia, who he's been in touch with. So I'm sure they're doing a lot of due diligence in those areas to try to figure out whatever moves that is possible he could have made.
Fogg says Lopez is extremely dangerous, not just because of his criminal past, which includes murder, shooting at a police officer, and now a violent escape, but because he has a taste of freedom. Freedom he'll likely never have again if captured.
He's got nothing to lose, man. Well, he's going to do whatever it takes to stay free. You happen to be in his way, he's going to take you out. That's not going to be a problem there.
This has been the state's largest manhunt since 2000 for the group who became infamously known as the Texas 7. 7 inmates who broke out of a maximum security security prison, killed a Texas police officer, and were eventually caught due to the television show America's Most Wanted.
The Texas 7 went on for over a month, but it was in a wide area. It stretched all across Texas.
The Texas Department of Criminal Justice confirming there are no plans to scale back the search for Lopez, and the reward for finding him now sits at $50,000. Marky Martin, News Nation, Dallas.
Well, a major development tonight in Washington. Help is on the way for families across America who are scrambling right now to feed their babies during that nationwide formula shortage. Just within the last couple of hours, President Biden has invoked the Defense Production Act to speed up production, get formula to those babies. The U.S. will also begin to use military airplanes to import formula from overseas. Correspondent Brooke Schaefer is joining us live tonight with the latest. Brooke, this cannot come soon enough for so many moms and dads. Even celebrities are mobilizing to help while we wait for formula.
Yeah, there is a lot of concern here, including concern from doctors. I actually spoke to a doctor today who told me that if some babies don't get the formula they need, they could get very sick and end up in the hospital.
If you would have told me that this was going to happen in the U.S., I would have told you impossible.
Dr. Gonzalez Valina is a pediatric gastroenterologist at Nicholas Children's Hospital in Miami. He told us his office phone is constantly ringing with desperate parents on the other end searching for baby formula.
I have to say, listen, my hands, are tied.
The shortage of baby formula in the U.S. putting parents and caregivers in a bind. In Tennessee, 2 babies, each with specific dietary requirements, were hospitalized after a doctor said those babies didn't adapt well to a new formula. There is serious concern, this doctor says, for babies with specific allergies or medical conditions. Changing their needed formula or not finding the right one could land some babies in the hospital.
Usually they can see a complete rash in their body. They can see vomiting, diarrhea.
Across the country, parents and caregivers are desperate. Celebrities like Shawn Johnson and her husband even stepping in to create an online baby formula exchange after they too had trouble finding formula for their little one.
So if you guys could look in your pantries if you have any unopened, not expired formula that you are willing to donate or you're not using, please go to babyformulaexchange.com.
And another major concern tonight as well, those desperate parents potentially turning to homemade baby formula. The doctor I talked to today warned against that. He said that could lead to even more serious complications like vomiting and seizures. Marnie?
Time is critical right now. All right, Brooke, thank you. We want to focus now on the results of Tuesday's primaries. The primaries came and went, but there is
president by refusing his request to find the requisite number of votes to allow him to win is on the ballot. The president is strongly supporting Congressman Jody Hice, who is trying to replace Raffensperger and is a big lie proponent and would be more compliant if Trump were to run for election again.
Yeah, David Axelrod, Abby Phillip, thank you so much. Appreciate it. There's more primary news ahead, including the political downfall and primary defeat of Congressman Madison Cawthorn and why some of his Republican fellow Congress members on Capitol Hill appear relieved. Later, an update on the mass murder in Buffalo. 10 people this weekend, one of them a woman who dedicated her life to her family. Learn more about this family's incalculable loss.
Anderson Cooper 360.
Going down, confidence would improve, optimism would increase, and people would start feeling a lot better. But right now, every time I turn on the TV, gas prices are going up and away. Every day a higher record price for gas and diesel. Now there's talk about diesel shortages coming. And as you say, this place in less than a year and a half, in 15, 16 months, is looking a lot more like, it's beginning to look a lot more like Venezuela than anything you and I or anybody ever could imagine.
The concern is not just poverty, but radicalism. I mean, no one's getting more moderate. So refusing to address people's legitimate concerns, calling them racist if they ask honest questions, all of that makes people more radical over time. Are you worried that the country could, you can kind of feel it moving underneath their feet here?
And that's what I think a lot of people in the far, far left want. I think one of the greatest political slogans was that of Vladimir Lenin before the Russian Revolution. It was very, very simple, 4 words: the worse, the better. The worse, the better. The worse the conditions were, more people would be radicalized and say, look, we've had it with the czar. Maybe we should bring Lenin in. Maybe he can turn things around. I think there's some people who want total, utter chaos in society. I have a piece in the American Spectator about the Democrat Party and how they have nothing but terrible ideas, awful solutions. And some of the people in the far left Democrat Party today, I think, want exactly that kind of chaos and ultimately a revolutionary type situation.
The worse, the better. Boy, that is chilling. Joy Murdoch, thank you so much.
Tucker.
2020 came the breakthrough the world has been waiting for. The first ever
Aura's all-in-one digital security.
It's being moved into Tier 1. Then between that, there's a Tier 2 area that's being...
to turn over on it.
C-SPAN's Washington Journal will mark the 100th anniversary of the Lincoln Memorial's dedication with Abraham Lincoln scholar Harold Holzer. He'll join us to talk about the 16th president, the memorial's creation, and the democratic ideas the memorial has come to represent. And at 2 p.m. Eastern on The Presidency, Erwin Gelman with his book Campaign of the Century, where he re-examines the 1960 presidential campaign between Richard Nixon and John Kennedy and the close outcome of that election. Exploring the American story. Watch American History TV, Saturday on C-SPAN 2. And find a full schedule on your program guide or watch online anytime at cspan.org/history. At least 6 presidents recorded conversations while in office. Hear many of those conversations on C-SPAN's new podcast, Presidential Recordings.
Season 1 focuses on the presidency of Lyndon Johnson. You'll hear about the 1964 Civil Rights Act, the 1964 presidential campaign, the Gulf of Tonkin incident, the March on Selma, and the war in Vietnam. Not everyone knew they were being recorded.
Certainly, Johnson's secretaries knew because they were tasked with transcribing many of those conversations. In fact, they were the ones who made sure that the conversations were taped as Johnson would signal to them through an open door between his office and theirs.
You'll also hear some blunt talk.
Jim.
Yes, sir.
I want a report of the number of people that signed to Kennedy the day he died, and the number signed to me now, and if mine are not less, I want them less right quick.
Yes, sir.
And if I can't ever go to the bathroom, I won't go. I promise you I won't go anywhere. I'll just stay right behind these black gates.
Presidential Recordings. Find it on the C-SPAN Now mobile app or wherever you get your podcasts. C-SPAN is your unfiltered view of government. We're funded by these television companies and more, including Comcast.
Oh, you think this is just a community center? No, it's way more than that. Comcast is partnering with 1,000 community centers to create Wi-Fi-enabled lift zones so students from low-income families can get the tools they need to be ready for anything.
Comcast supports C-SPAN as a public service, along with these other television providers, giving you a front row seat to democracy.
Avi Loeb joins us now, professor of science at Harvard, head of Harvard's Galileo Initiative. He's also the author of
And I'll be a strong voice for faith, family, and freedom.
Big promises from Madison Cawthorn, but that was 2020, when the congressman from North Carolina was first running for office.
We were just focused on caring about the people that I want to represent.
But at some point after his stunning political victory, everything changed, and Cawthorn's political future began to unravel. His message seemed to turn from caring to chaos. This was him on January 6th last year, just before rioters stormed the U.S. Capitol.
My friends, I want you to chant with me so loud that the cowards on Washington, D.C. that I serve with can hear you.
There was also this inexplicable behavior by Cawthorn. This video of him punching a tree went viral, with millions of people just trying to figure out why. And after Russia attacked Ukraine, Cawthorn said this about Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelenskyy.
Remember that Zelenskyy is a thug.
The blowback from his fellow Republicans was fierce.
Madison is wrong. If there's any thug in this world, it's Putin.
Republican Tom Rice of South Carolina told CNN Cawthorn was more interested in throwing bombs than he is in actually trying to help the country. Cawthorn also racked up a number of questionable incidents, driving with a revoked license and carrying handguns through TSA airport security twice.
I made a mistake. I forgot to disarm before I went through a TSA checkpoint, and that's my bad.
Still, perhaps nothing Cawthorn did or said was as stunning as his accusations in March, claiming he'd been invited to a cocaine-fueled orgy in Washington.
Well, hey, we're going to have kind of a sexual get-together at one of our homes. You should come. Yeah. And then you realize they're asking you to come to an orgy, and then you watch them do, a key bump of cocaine right in front of you.
Cawthorn's comments on the podcast Warrior Poet Society sent Republicans in Washington and his home state of North Carolina reeling. Many were already losing patience with the freshman congressman, claiming his problematic behavior was dragging down the party. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy.
I just told him he's lost my trust. He's going to have to earn it back.
McCarthy also said Cawthorn later admitted his remarks about the orgy were not true. Senior Republican Senator Richard Burr told CNN about Cawthorn, he's an embarrassment on any day that ends in Y. Then, just this month, with Cawthorn already in jeopardy of losing his re-election bid, despite the support of Donald Trump, an opposition group posted a video of him online. That video appeared to show Cawthorn naked in bed with another person. Cawthorn confirmed it was him in the video and tried to explain it away on Twitter, writing, "Years ago in this video I was being crass with a friend, trying to be funny. We are acting foolish and joking." North Carolina Republican Senator Tom Tillis, who chose to support Cawthorn's opponent in the primary, described the video like this.
Absurd to embarrassing.
And Randy joins us now. Do we know what's next for Mr. Cawthorn?
Every search you make.
The number of Twitter spam accounts or bots could be at 20%. And while some believe Musk is only angling for a better price, there is now an eye-opening audit by the software company SparkToro that shows who all those phony users might be or who they might follow. Turns out after analyzing location issues, default profile images, and new users, SparkToro says almost 50% of President Biden's 22 million followers are bots, fakes, spam accounts. Something tells me a Musk tweet is about to be composed. Tucker.
Amazing. What a story. Trace Gallagher, thanks so much for that.
You bet.
So we told you about the Biden administration's Ministry of Truth, the Disinformation Bureau. The Washington Post reported today with deep sadness that it's being shut down effectively. The Post was very upset by this, and in a piece by Taylor Lorenz, who may be the second most ludicrous person in America, she blamed right-wing attacks. Now, the most ludicrous person in America is Nina Jankowicz. She was the truth czar, and she's the reason it was shut down. Nina Jankowicz was so embarrassing that even the Biden administration, which has an almost infinite capacity for embarrassment, or really no shame whatsoever, you see the White House press secretary? Even they couldn't put up with her. Now, Nina Jankowicz has an obvious response to this. If you think she's absurd, well, you're a sexist. Watch.
Women should not be involved in government. They cannot be trusted.
The real reason she's angry is because no Chads would hit it and stick with it.
Those are just two of the thousands of abusive tweets I've received over the past couple of months. Unfortunately, for women in politics, journalism, academia, or basically any time when we express an opinion while female, that is not the exception. It's the norm.
Oh, I'm sassy and strong. But if people criticize me, I have to put on costumes. And I cry because I'm so strong and sassy. We could play her greatest hits for hours. She's an expert on disinformation, after all. But if we had to pick our favorite performance by Nina Jankowicz, all of which are about Nina Jankowicz because the well of narcissism is endless, it would have to be this one.
Information laundering is really quite ferocious. It's when a huckster takes some lies and makes them sound precocious by saying them in Congress or a mainstream outlet. So disinformation's origins are slightly less atrocious. It's It's how you hide a little lie. It's how you hide a little lie. It's how you hide a little lie. When Rudy Giuliani shared bad intel from Ukraine, or when TikTok influencers say COVID can cause pain, they're laundering disinfo and we really should take note and not support their lies with our wallet, voice or vote. Oh!